Here, I'm going to start streaming now. Yeah, I just put up the rest of my stuff because it was all sitting down here on the floor, and I said, well, I need to do something with all that. Sherwin, we've got to figure out what to do with this. I've got a stack this thick of hero cards that are all signed that we just need to give out.
I've got a stack almost that thick sitting in my
something.
front seat that need to get mailed out to some pretty cool people that we've identified. But same thing with all the Patreon stuff. I've got it sort of piled.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't done a lot of it yet, so
Gotcha.
You're right.
Yeah. So let's see. Let me go ahead and tweet this out, Sherwin. Keep our esteemed guest good and.
All right, Nate. Well, it will come as no surprise to you what we have lined up in our topics. Maybe some of the questions that we have from listeners will be a surprise. That'll be fun. Maybe catch you off guard. I don't know, but we're going to talk about the regular stuff.
Okay.
But we also really want to talk about your new adventures into the racing world as a broadcaster and as a journalist, and the things that NBC has expounded your role with.
Cool. Sounds good.
Excellent. Let's see.
Expounded your role.
Let me see.
Uh-oh.
There we go. I've got.
I need to turn my volume off right before. There we go.
yeah.
I was like, I don't know if that was my echo or somewhere else, but mine was bound to happen eventually without muting my laptop.
Yeah. Nate, where are you at right now?
At home in my office, makeshift office of sorts.
Makeshift office.
Yeah.
It's where all the magic happens. Where do you live? Are you in Charlotte or elsewhere?
I live in Charlotte.
Yeah, okay. I figured that was the case.
NBC's got a studio there, correct?
We do. We have a small space with a few offices and the studio where we do NASCAR America from down here.
Oh, cool.
That is in the south end of Charlotte. It's about a mile outside uptown. It's about a mile away from NASCAR Plaza, where NASCAR's uptown Charlotte headquarters are.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fun.
So out of pure curiosity, as someone who works from home or does a lot of satellite work, how much of your daily work is satellite, or do you go to are you a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 office guy? Or?
As I get older, I perhaps am moving into that. I feel like those circadian rhythms, or whatever that might be, of my 40s have me waking up now much earlier than ever before. So I do feel like I'm most productive between 8 and 5. That doesn't mean I keep office banker's hours, but the older I get, the more I feel like I probably work a more normal life. I'm less productive later at night. This probably won't be as good a podcast as it would have been 20 years ago when I was working as a copy editor and writing, and I'd be up till all hours of the night and be a little bit more of a live wire at 9:04 p.m. So I'll do my best for you guys. But, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a 9 to 5 guy. I'm certainly. Certainly the job kind of precludes that kind of existence, because you're always reacting to news, and that just doesn't happen on a typical banker's hours type cycle. But I'd say that I'm most productive during those hours at home.
Where do you do your podcast from?
I have a mobile unit with 3 headset mics, but usually just 2 guests, myself and someone else. And I have a little Zoom recorder. And I'll either, if I'm taping it in Charlotte, I'll often do it at the NASCAR America studio, because the acoustics in that room obviously are naturally good for audio. So I'll often do it in that same studio where we shoot the show from down here, but I'll just use the desk and put my stuff there. But oftentimes, this past weekend, I mentioned you guys, I was at the Rolex 24 testing, the Roar at Daytona, and I taped a couple of podcasts in a little radio room in the deadline room at the media center there. So that's where I usually tape them, in wherever I can find a table and 2 chairs, as I tell people. As long as the acoustics are good, even if there's a little bit of background noise, sometimes that's good for, ambient sound.
Yeah.
And then, as far as editing, it's usually the Robbie Gordon podcast I edited, I put out last week. I edited right here on this very couch where I'm sitting right now talking to you guys from a week ago tonight. So this is all the glamour that you're getting here with this peek into my world.
Editing.
Yeah, well, the cool thing about that is though that you do like. So for the folks that are listening, they're like, man, I'd really like to talk on a microphone and record it, and that'd be fun. It's actually not hard. The hard part is like having the content and the access.
Yeah.
So I mean that really is the only thing that's hard about it.
We talk all the time. We started this podcast because it was like, hey, we're sitting around talking NASCAR for 4 hours at a time. Surely we could sit down on a mic and do that.
Don't call me Shirley.
Yeah. And our first few episodes being like, I won't call it a disaster, but it's funny to go back and listen because I've said it so many times that like if you're talking NASCAR, you don't realize that you're just sitting there and you say something and the other person kind of nods their head like you said something profound and you both take a couple sips of drink. And then somebody else responds, and you all kind of nod your head and drink, and you're enjoying that. But on the podcast, you can't just sit there with a minute in between and staring at each other,
right?
Which is what we did in our first few episodes.
Didn't realize that you had to have half a second cuts are the best. Like, so if you pause for an entire second. People were like, I don't know about this.
Yeah, well, he better say something real important if he's thinking that hard.
Yeah, a second can sound like an eternity when you're doing like sounded, and it's sort of amazing.
We were talking about that with Jeff Striegel.
I appreciate the fact that you guys stream this and do this in this live setting because, I mean, you joke about the quality of your first few episodes. If you go back and listen to the first few episodes of the NASCAR and NBC podcast, and a few of those I cringe because I was still figuring out levels, and I'm still understanding that. I mean, I got some feedback on a couple of episodes last year, and actually some help from some listeners who made some really good suggestions. Like I said, I had at the outset, the first year and a half, I had somebody helping me with the editing and the production a little bit, but I've taken on a lot of that on my own here the last year and a half, and I like it because I mean, I don't know how much editing you guys do on your podcast, but I've listened to a lot and read a lot about like how to make a podcast sound good, and I think a lot of the key is in the editing. I like if it's the format of my podcast, I'm not saying it would necessarily work for what you guys are doing here, but if you're talking about like the sit down 2-person podcast, I think it works best sometimes when it is well edited, and that I'm not saying cut out every awkward pause, but I think that there are ways to sort of improve pacing and hold listeners' attention if you edit, with a really sharp ear for content.
Yeah, for better or worse, we don't edit at all. What I do is at the very beginning. Oh no, I wouldn't think you're disparaging whatsoever. But at the end of the podcast, I chop off the first 2 seconds of silence. And then I chop off the last 2 seconds of silence that it takes me to hit the stop button. And then besides that, that's what gets uploaded. Everything in between. If somebody drops an F-bomb, you know what? We're not on broadcast TV like some people, present company excluded.
And I try my best to see when he's going to do it and say something. Not necessarily F-bombs. That's not my goal. That's not my goal in the world. But if I have something come to mind that I just want to drop at the end, I'll let it fly, and Rusty will keep it in, and that's about the extent of the edit. And I think we wanted to challenge ourselves to do a radio show. Mm-hmm. It's part of the fun of the hobby is doing a radio show.
Yeah, and you said the word hobby. If I really wish I actually had another a few hours a week or 8 hours a week or 12 hours a week to actually go in and work on it, because we'd do the podcast, and I'd be able to put together commercial bits, if you will. Something like, hey, here's a teaser, or here's the funny thing that Sherwin said, or that Rusty said during the thing, or that Nate Ryan said, and that sort of stuff. And I think it could actually be pretty cool. But otherwise, I play the theme song as we're going. I make fun of myself when I mess up and hit the wrong sound, and that all just gets uploaded to iTunes. Heck with it.
Well, there's some beauty in that, I think, in the rawness of it. And I can tell you, sometimes I wish I didn't edit as fastidiously as I do, because you can fall down an absolute rabbit hole and just never emerge. I mean, I can take a with Robbie Gordon, I think that conversation was about 40 minutes, and it probably took me somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 3 to 4 hours to get it exactly where I wanted. But now I've taken like hour-long conversations. There was somebody I had an hour and a half long conversation with last year, edited it down to 45 minutes. And I thought it sounded a lot better at 45 minutes versus the raw sound, but like getting it to that level, it probably took me a good 6-7 hours. It took a full day to do it, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what we discovered, and I say we. That's not even fair to say we. Rusty's doing all the IT stuff, and when we first started, and like getting on iTunes was, it was a new adventure for us to figure out how to be in that space. And we did have some real challenging audio quality stuff that was going on, and like we really did need to edit it. And then he's like, "Hey man, we got a soundboard now. We both have mics. These mics they're good. The audio reception is good. Why don't we just try to do it live?" And so we just said, we're putting it on Periscope, and it's live. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and we were trying to figure out if anybody would want to watch that. And then we eventually rotated that to YouTube when YouTube producers showed up. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't we just do it live? I mean, occasionally we're going to make mistakes, especially me, because I've got a language problem. Although I will say, and I'm still happy about this, it took me 174 episodes to say the F word, and I did it twice in one episode, and it was not intentional.
Yeah. Does anybody use Periscope anymore? I have not seen a Periscope like tweeted out or anything in a long time. It's wild how much
Facebook Live, I think, is what the people are doing now.
Or Instagram or something. Yeah. Like that was a flash in the pan. I can't believe how crazy that was. Instagram
Once they lost the NFL thing, that they
yeah. Instagram. Are you doing Instagram, Nate?
I'm not much of an Instagram person, actually.
That's where I went total Luddite or something. Like, and I'm in IT, or I shouldn't say IT. I'm in software. Two different things. But
it's a dumb platform, but it's fun at the same time because women be like not wearing clothes and stuff.
I wish that Instagram came up before Facebook, because I feel like it's a better platform for what I want to see on social media.
Certainly,
but
Snapchat.
I can't add another social media right now. I struggle heavily as it is with the ones that I have. So it's hard to add it. I should just get rid of Facebook. I'm hardly ever on it anyway.
I'm that close. I'm this close to not being on Facebook. I've tried to coach Rusty into being a little bit more active on Twitter.
Yeah,
because I think it would help. But I do all the Instagram. I don't hate it, but to me, Twitter is so much more productive. Like, you can get an answer. Yeah. You can see people putting stuff out there, and if you don't like what they're saying, you just hit mute.
Roger says Instagram is awesome for us cat parents.
Roger, cats of Instagram.
As a multi-cat parent, I am. I can jump on board.
I'm a cat
I just need
uncle.
To do it. A cat uncle. Yeah. When
my sister has a cat. You have cats. Yeah. I'm a cat uncle.
Yeah. When my wife's gone and it's just me and Sherwin hanging out for the weekend. Oh yeah.
The cats. Well, one of them gets the skittish a lot of love, and the other one gets not a lot of hate. As much.
It's all good. Nate, is there a time that you got to leave tonight?
No.
We've already gobbled up 15 minutes where we didn't even start iTunes yet.
Yeah.
We should probably do that.
Yeah, and get started.
Get some of this on an actual record. Well, it's on an actual recording. It'll live on YouTube forever. But in terms of the people that will end up downloading via Podbean or Google Play or iTunes,
all that stuff, we'll get it started. Nate, we'll drop off maybe 30 seconds, maybe 90 seconds, something like that. It just depends, because we're going to be playing our because I don't edit in the theme song or anything. I'm playing it live
it's not
as
a
we
drop.
go.
He does it live. It's good.
Yeah, so you might not hear us, but people will be able to hear you. So if you're like, hey guys, I can't hear you, and then if you start like typing, people will hear the typing and stuff. We've had folks doing. Well, actually on the iPads,
you just stay quiet.
Yeah, yeah. So if you can just shut up,
we will bring you back in. We promise.
Oh man. Me telling the NASCAR and NBC guy to shut up, that's going to be in the highlight reel.
We're going to get punched in the face come get into the racetrack.
Yeah. All right, y'all ready to roll? Let's do it. We are recording now.
Media.
Talladega to Daytona, Bristol, Charlotte, it's an over. We are NASCAR.
Welcome, y'all. Do it again, Sherwin. Come on now. Attaboy. This is the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 177. It's Tuesday, January 8, 2019. I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace. I'm in the PTM Podcast studio with Pregame Engineer Andrew Sherwin. What's up, dude?
I don't like to apply unnecessary superlatives to the people that are willing to say yes to doing this stuff, but this is one of my favorite people to talk to for lots of reasons.
Well, dude, we're starting the show 15 minutes late because we've just been BSing for the last
Right, because we forgot to start the show.
We forgot to start the show.
Like, we probably could have had 10 or 15 more minutes of content that would end up in the iTunes file, but we didn't, and so we had to kind of pause, break, and start.
Before we do start, y'all know what the deal is. This week's show is brought to you by our official sponsors at the $5 and up per month level. You know what? I didn't even say the first part. Our podcast is sponsored by you. You know, let's not thank our people before we tell you about what's going on. This podcast is sponsored by you. That's right. You go to patreon.com/PTM. Join the What You Drink Club for as little as $1 a month. Get your free koozie. Best part is every cent in 2019. I'm changing it right now. It should say 2019. Change that to a 9. Save. Is donated to sponsoring drivers. Once again, join the PTM Posse today. Be a part of the sport you love. This week's show is brought to you by our official sponsors at the $5 per month level. That is Laura Henshaw, Aaron Bidden, Robert Keplinger, Coleman Clam, Garrett Kepner, Ryan Keeper, Patrick Cleary, Jeff Brown, Brandon Crow, Kathleen McDonald, Stacey Wright, Brandon Carl, Billy Workman, Rika Porter, Jumpy Bob, Les Miller, Tommy Witt, Julie Bosley, John Pearson, Eddie Greer III, Younger Motorsports, Jason Rudd, David Mullins, Joe Noth, Patrick Johnson, and welcome to the PTM Posse, Mr. Brett Morris. I shouldn't even say welcome. I shouldn't say welcome to the PTM Posse.
He's one of those like race car air horn noises.
Oh, man.
Brett, so I'm going. Well, we'll talk about it. It's in the thing.
Oh, Brett Morris gives Rodney Sandstorm a run for his money. In terms of the look, that thing.
I don't know.
That thing was killer.
My obligations are for visiting customers, but I told him if I've got 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I'm showing up at Indy with a mullet.
Oh, man.
And a mustache.
Oh, yeah. Right on. Y'all, I want to say this before we get started. This past year, in 2018, the PTM Posse has raised $1,597.29. Let's just round that up. Add a few dollars. $1,600 this year, y'all, that y'all have done. My hat is off to you. We've got some huge stuff coming up. We've already been talking with folks and things and ideas and stuff that we're going to do with all this, and we're actually really excited to bring some stuff to y'all. If you're a sponsor and you've been a sponsor for a while, there's going to be rewards for this thing. Like, hey, it's fixing to blow up, man. This is super cool having all that. So thank you, everybody, for doing that. And I say thank you on behalf of the folks who are receiving all this stuff. We're not doing it for ourselves this time. And that's the reason I tell you how much money it is so that everybody keeps me honest. That's the amount that's going on the check.
You know what it is, and you also know that, I mean, the most easy way for us to distribute this is through channels that we have access to. Mm-hmm. So, and we sat on it last year for months and tried to figure out what the hell we were going to do with it. And then it was like, hey, how about that kid we met down at Atlanta Motor Speedway that races the Legends car?
Yeah.
And we're like, well, that makes perfect sense. Why don't we just keep...
So we'll have some announcements and everything else coming up over the next several weeks, but I wanted to announce that was the final number for 2018.
Which is a little bit more than $300 more than we were able to give last year.
Holy crap. That is so cool.
Which is significant, y'all, because that might buy tires to go to a national race, whereas last year's money, I think, did a good job of covering some stuff for all the 10 races at Atlanta Motor Speedway. So
killer. All right, with that, let's welcome to the show, making his PTM PhD appearance. We've got our bachelor's, we've got our master's. This is the PhD, defending the thesis here. Journalist for NBC Sports, as if he has to, get our accolades for, talking on a microphone or anything. Host of the NASCAR on NBC podcast, on Twitter at Nate Ryan. It's I should say it's somebody different. He's on Twitter at Nate Ryan.
Bob Pockers.
It's Darrell Waltrip. It is Nate Ryan. What's up, Nate?
So Not much. I get mistaken for Bob Pockris all the time. So
I can see that.
And
I can see
somewhat
that.
vice versa. So it'd be kind of funny if you did say, "Hey, Bob Pockris is here." No, pleasure to be here, Rusty and Sherwin. Thanks for having me. Always a good time to join you guys.
Thanks for coming on.
It's I'm not surprised you get confused for Bob because you two are very much intellectuals. You speak a way that not NASCAR people may not be used to, but it certainly provides.
That's a polite way of saying it. I appreciate that. Not everyone is so delicate.
It provides the picture that needs to be painted because you're using the words that need to be said. And I
would say you have very similar smiles. Like just in terms of looking at you, the smile is very similar. I could see people walk up to you, oh, Bob Pockris. So
they both have.
Well, we both wear glasses, and both jet black hair. Bob's is a little bit curlier than mine. But another factoid: Bob and I share the same birthday. We were both born on March 1st.
Whoa.
I did not know that.
So you are Bob Pockris.
Maybe I did.
Yes.
You are Bob Pockris.
This whole time.
And you both have incredibly awesome photo bomby Twitter backgrounds.
Yeah. Well, the difference between Bob and I there, by the way, is that Bob still tries to take good photos for Twitter. I'm well aware of what a mediocre photographer I am. So God love Bob for still trying to spread the word visually. And shame on me for making fun of hashtag Bob pics here and there, but I can't help it.
Nate,
No,
you know how we
good.
do this. You know how we start the thing. Since it's your PhD episode, what you drinking on tonight?
Cup of herbal tea.
The herbal tea. What kind of herbs and spices are in this one? We got 11 of them, or what's the deal?
I think it's blackberry flavor celestial seasonings. It's not that really extravagant or exotic.
No, I mean, every once in a while, I jump into the mint celestial seasoning, whatever that's called. My wife has some,
Is
and
that Annie? What do they call that?
I don't know.
The joint thing that works good for joints.
Oh,
Anti-inflammatory.
Okay, it might be. I don't know. It's nice. I don't know. I like it. Anyway, Sherwin, what are we drinking?
Not that. All right, so
not herbal tea. I can go get some. We got some downstairs.
Yeah, so Nate, in honor of your what do we call that?
Hometown
having
here?
graduated. Well, he's from California,
alma mater
I believe
deal.
it. Having graduated from Northwestern, we've got a Chicago beer here.
Oh, great.
Goose Island IPA. And because I listened to a really awesome podcast with a couple of people that I think our podcast fans might recognize in John Reap, who used to be the "That Thing Got a Hemi" guy, and Sarah Tiana, who was the one that was on Fox that everybody got pissed about, even though she was super funny. We've got John Rich's Redneck Riviera whiskey.
John Rich.
It's a blended.
So I saddle up my boys.
Yes, saddle up my horse. Save a horse, ride a cowboy.
Ride into the city.
So it's a very well priced, tasty whiskey that profits. Some of them go to the St. Jude Hospital for Children.
I think you're saying the bottle costs $25, and they're giving $4 to St. Jude's every time you buy a bottle. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that was one of the cool things that John Rich said in the podcast was he goes, one of the cool things about owning a whiskey brand is you get to set the price.
Well, and one of the nice things about owning a whiskey brand and you're filthy rich is you don't have to worry about what the price is, right?
And being a good businessman. Mm-hmm. John Rich is, some of y'all will know him as the guy that won The Apprentice. He was, he just...
Oh, did he?
He's amazing. He really knows what he's doing and was an original member of Lone Star. Hell of a musician. So this is interesting for me. I just discovered this in the last week.
Cool. That's pretty cool. It's a drinking whiskey, too. 80 proof. We've had a couple...
Oh, yeah. It's all night. You don't even...
Of it. Yeah, it's pretty tasty. I'm into it. And right now, so since I just started releasing it, I think I saw in here it's actually aged 2 years.
95% of it's 2 years or older, like a bourbon, a bonded bourbon would be.
So it's an interesting deal there. So anyway, we're sitting here talking whiskey, and we've got our esteemed guest just looking at us like we're idiots.
Who actually knows race cars, which is what we're supposed to be talking about.
Our esteemed guest looking at us like we're idiots is pretty much a weekly occurrence. But at the end, they typically say, you know what, that was pretty fun, and they come back for more. So welcome back with the idiots,
Much
Nate.
to their chagrin.
Yeah. Nate, how's the off-season treating you so far?
It's been good. Had a good month of December of going into hibernation and not doing anything with racing, which was great, but got a little bit of a head start on 2019. This past weekend, I got to go to Daytona International Speedway for the Roar at the Rolex 24, the preseason test session for the season opening IMSA race, which NBC Sports Group has the IMSA series this year, which is, of course, sports cars, and it starts, much like NASCAR, it starts with their crown jewel in the Rolex 24-hour race, one of the most prestigious endurance races in the world, which will take place, I think it's January 26th is the date, or 25th and the 26th, I should say, because it starts on Saturday at midday and Sunday midday the next day. So I'm covering the Rolex 24 this year for the first time. So it was great to go down and learn a lot about sports cars and the personalities involved this past weekend. I'm looking forward to going back for the race. It's been a little bit more of a busier January than it usually is this time of year for me, but it's a good kind of busy.
Do we know if AJ's in a ride for that?
Allmendinger.
Yeah.
Yes, he is. So two things with AJ. One, I'll say to answer your question. Yes, he is going to be driving for the Michael Shank team.
That's right.
I think the two teams that or two cars that team will have in the race. So he'll be racing, and he also will be part of NBC Sports Group's IMSA coverage throughout the year. He's going to be a contributor as well to NASCAR America, our NASCAR coverage, our IndyCar coverage. NBC Sports Group making a big play this year to become the home for motorsports. We'll have the full IndyCar season. We'll have all of IMSA. We started broadcasting Supercross as well this year, of all the Supercross races, and the Outdoor National, of course, the final 20 Cup races of the NASCAR season. So AJ, of course, touches all of those parts of auto racing and motorsports, and he'll be a big part of our coverage this year, which is great.
I think that's a great get. Sorry to cut you off there, Rusty, but I was surprised to see that Fox wouldn't make a move on him. And not to belabor the competitor, but I think that's a great get because AJ's perspective on all those different cars is as good as any driver you could get to have perspective on all those cars.
Oh, he's got a career out of turning left and right.
Yeah, he's raced
and driving on everything.
Raced everything.
Yeah, he's driven
including
everything.
I think when he was a kid, he did the dirt bike stuff like Jimmy Johnson did. Am I wrong?
Right. No, you're right, and he's won in everything. I mean, I think people in NASCAR know certainly he's won road course races in Xfinity. Won at Watkins Glen and Cup a few years ago, and this is a guy who won a lot of Champ Car races prior to the IndyCar merger, but won some races in the Champ Car Series, led the Indianapolis 500 in 2013 when he was running for Roger Penske, so had a lot of success in IndyCar. And, of course, he's won the Rolex 24 Hours, I believe, with Michael Shank, I think in a class victory. And I'm not sure if he has an overall win or not. I should really have studied up on this before I came on. But I know he has a lot of sports car success, and that's one of the reasons he's running the race again this year. So, yeah, he's extremely versatile, and I think that's what you guys just hit it. I mean, that's what makes him a great fit for NBC Sports Group with our expansion into having all these different forms of motorsports this year. To have AJ Allmendinger as part of that is going to be good for us.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you study before you come on the PTM podcast, you're doing it wrong.
I'm already doing it wrong drinking.
We sure as hell don't.
I should have a shot or a beer in front of me.
Oh, it's all good.
Well, I mean, so one of the cool things about what you just said is the underlying point of by having somebody who has raced in all these different series, being a part of the commentary and the post shows and the pre-show stuff for all these different racing series that means that for all these different racing series, we only need to go to NBC Sports or NBC to find the coverage of the racing. I think that's huge. Yeah. I think that's a big deal.
That's the idea. I think that's good for us too. It certainly is. I saw our PR team was putting out the word on that starting today with the home of motorsports. I think is how we are branding ourselves this year in terms of our coverage. And started this past Saturday night with the Supercross opener. That kicks off 15 straight weeks of Supercross coverage on NBCSN, and I think a few races might be on NBC. And they're all available through the NBC Sports Gold package and streaming. All of these events, just like NASCAR. I hope people have found that the NBC Sports app, which allows you to stream on your devices or on your home computer, it really works well. And I think if you're a motorsports fan, I think you're going to be appreciative of the fact that you'll be able to go to the NBC Sports app to watch a whole plethora of auto racing this year across the board, including virtually 24 hours of the Rolex 24 coverage here in a few weeks.
Yes, we had our first $5 word. Woo!
Plethora? Does that count?
Yeah, it counts. It counts.
Sure.
On this show, it
Plethora?
counts.
That was from Three Amigos. How can you know what a plethora is if you... whatever it was. They used that word. That was the thing. Dude, it is so cool to me that there is not just a niche network, but a major broadcast network that is investing this heavily. I won't ask Nate what the strategic point is or anything like that is right here. I don't want to have him to answer to that, but for me, there feels like there's a renaissance, I guess is what I mean. When a major broadcast network says we're going to go this big into, you said IMSA, you said Supercross, NASCAR. I mean, Supercross it feels like that's growing. It's been around forever, and it's growing every year. I see tweets and stuff. I'll see a tweet and then go watch Supercross because I saw people who I respect a lot tweeting about it, and I guess that's what they want out of it. But it's super cool to me. And Nate, go ahead. I know you kind of peeked up at the word Renaissance there. That might be the $2 word.
No, well, I like what you're saying too there, Rusty, about doubling down on motorsports. And I just looked it up. So the release says that this year NBC Sports will be the home of more than 1,500 hours of motorsports coverage, and that's across NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, Mecum Auctions, Monster Energy AMA Supercross, Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Championship, Monster Jam. So a ton of different properties and, a lot of ways to be able to watch this. I don't want to come off as a complete corporate shill here, but, it is, this word gets tossed around and overused, but I'm excited about it, because again, I've never covered the Rolex 24 before, and this prevents a natural tie-in for me getting to go to Daytona at the end of January for the first time. I'm very enthused about that, to cross that off my list, and getting to go back to the Indianapolis 500 this year as NBC Sports takes over, broadcast coverage of that signature iconic race for the first time. That's going to be like, a real thrill. And, I was talking to some IMSA executives this past weekend, and like what they appreciate about our involvement, I think, is that it is genuine. I mean, you hear another term that gets tossed around a lot is racer, and what does that really mean? And sometimes maybe it doesn't always apply, but in terms of some really important people, I think at NBC Sports Group who are in the brain trust and who are making the really big decisions. I mean, this comes from a genuine place. I mean, the reason, obviously, there are bottom line financially motivated reasons for NBC Sports wanting to become the home of motorsports, but I can tell you from being in the room with a lot of these big decision makers and players, a lot of these guys really love racing. And I think that's evident not just in the commitment to all the coverage we're putting out there, but also the commitment to the quality of the broadcast and the people they choose to put on air, like an AJ Allmendinger, like going out and getting a guy like that. They know it's because he can bring a lot to all these different platforms, and they're doing it because, they want to serve the race fan.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's almost one of those, I don't know what we're going to say next, but yes, all of that is so cool. One thing that needs to resonate amongst our audience is you're going to have opportunities to see really well broadcasted motorsports avenues that maybe you haven't watched before or maybe you haven't seen before. And that is the whole point of this process. To your point, Nate, this is a marketing tool for NBC and saying, hey, we're committed to motorsports. Why don't you expand your perspective outside of NASCAR or outside of Supercross or IMSA or whatever it is? Because we're going to have all of it, and you're going to get to see it.
Yeah, Yeah,
Super cool.
and I think I don't know if you guys listen to Sirius XM very much, but Pete Pistone is another guy, one of the co-hosts of the Morning Drive with Mike Bagley there, who's always had a lot of involvement across. His family's been involved in NASCAR. He's grew up in the Midwest, so he knows IndyCar well. And Pete's contention has always been that motorsports needs to look at things as a more kind of cohesive sort of rising tide lifts all boats sort of approach. And I think in the past, especially go back 10 years ago, I feel like there were some, flashpoints there between NASCAR and IndyCar where there was some sniping, and I think it's been unfortunate. And now with some of the new leadership at IndyCar and at NASCAR, I think, and they had this motorsports summit actually at NBC Sports Group headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut last month, where they brought together all of these executives from all of the motorsports properties I just mentioned that are being broadcast on NBC Sports Group, and got them to start talking about maybe a NASCAR IndyCar doubleheader in the future. I mean, that's not just going to make sense for a broadcast partner like us that has two of these properties now, fully in the portfolio, but also for NASCAR and IndyCar to have their fans kind of get exposed to it. I mean, you guys just touched on it. I think especially Supercross. We've got a NBC Sports Motorsports Twitter account that I believe is new this year, and they were tweeting some clips from Supercross on Saturday night. And I just think that is one of those racing series that once you get exposed to it, once you go to one of those, but and as far as social media, like getting exposed to like a 15 or a 20-second clip, or even like a minute or 2-minute clip, I mean, that is in some ways the reason that Supercross has such great demographics and they appeal to such younger fans and younger audiences is because of it's so easily packaged into a way that if you're a racing fan, you can watch it, I think, get into it really quickly, especially if you're maybe more a casual racing fan. So it's like NASCAR and IndyCar look to build their audiences and get younger and try to hook that younger fan base. I think if they're working together like with the Supercross and with NBC's involvement on all levels of that, helping with it, I think it portends nothing but good things, I hope, for the future of racing. Because I mean, I know you guys are no strangers to this. I mean, there's no secret that there have been some real challenges and struggles for racing in the last decade, and a lot of it is relevance. A lot of it is how do you stay on the radar screen of mainstream sports America, and I think moves like this would help.
Well, with that exposure, with all the dirt stuff that we're talking about, my end goal here or end vision is maybe they'll bring back championship off-road racing, which was perhaps my favorite racing of all time. Core.
Yeah.
Carl Renezetter, and Johnny Greaves.
Well, Robbie Gordon be all up in there somewhere.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. So,
he's got his stadium trucks deal.
But the renaissance is the word that I used before of these things that have been around for a while, but I think now are starting to gain some traction in the stuff, Sherwin, that we've talked about before. Hey, the younger generation or the newer generations, there's a lot of things that are grabbing attention, so attention spans are shortened. Hey, if I watch Supercross, I'm looking at a 30, 40 lap race at the max. And
it's 20 minutes now.
Boom, boom,
they
boom.
Shortened it from 25 laps to 20 minutes.
Yeah. So they're responding really well to that, and maybe this is the next level there. So I was just trying to give a shout out to Core because boy, did I love that race. It's been like a decade.
Core, sorry to interrupt you, Rusty. Is that the Jack Flannery, Kurt LeDuc series of old? Do you remember those? Those
I would have to look that up, but Core went bankrupt back in like 2008. It's been a decade, and that was my favorite racing of all time. Those guys were insane. Every truck / car, whatever vehicle that you call that, the winner always. It was so funny. I think their body was made out of paper mache. Because at the end of the first lap, everyone's body panels were just tossed to the side. Yeah. They're just racing these piping drapes.
I'm trying to think.
It is fun.
Oh, good.
I'm trying to think of the last Robbie Gordon podcast that I listened to, and whose show he was on. But he does that stadium super trucks thing, which is an even more glorified short version of what Core used to be, which was really just Supercross with giant trucks, which is why it was so cool.
I don't know if that would have been the NASCAR NBC podcast, but we had Robbie Gordon on last week. I talked to him.
Well,
and,
yes, it was.
We did. It was okay. We did talk.
I'm
about
embarrassed
the
now.
Super trucks. It's okay. We did talk about the Stadium Super Trucks, and that was one of the things we talked about. Is that like he believes what they're doing, what Supercross is doing, is future of motorsports because it's in that, again, as you said, short attention span theater society we live in. These shorter, digestible packages would be great. And your point about Core. So I believe the predecessor of Core was something called SOTA, I think was the acronym, and it was like Stadium Off-Road Racing. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, I once, one of the my first year as a auto racing writer is at a paper in San Bernardino, California, and they have a Supercross track there, that they still use as an outdoor venue on the national circuit called Glen Helen Raceway, and they had a winter series with these trucks. And they ran the Supercross track with, or much of it, with these off-road stadium trucks that would just, Rusty's point or whoever was just saying about how the fenders would fall off and everything like that. It was just crazy. They would do jumps. It was muddy. Guess who won that soda race that day at Glen Helen Raceway? A guy named Jimmy Johnson.
Of course,
who was about a year or two away from moving on the pavement and running like ASA. But I mean, not only is it a lot of fun to watch, but that was Robbie Gordon's contention that he came out of that. Jimmy Johnson came out of trucks. He thinks it can be a pipeline to some of these bigger series. So
here's something funny. While you were talking and everything, I'm doing the Wikipedia and stuff. Core was founded by Marty Reed from ESPN.
Oh, wow.
Right.
I didn't know that. And indeed, you are correct. It displaced soda, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
So,
okay.
Sherwin, let's go ahead and start talking silly season. Let's break some stuff down. Let's tear it down.
Let's actually get into the show sheet 25 minutes later or whatever.
Right? It might be half an hour. No, you know what? I'm going to skip around on the show notes. If you are a $5 and up per month sponsor, you get the show notes ahead of time. If you're following along, you're totally screwed because I'm just jumping around at this point. We've been talking about...
I'm not even looking at him, so I'm just going to react to you.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about your podcast with Robbie Gordon. I have not listened yet, and I'm absolutely going to. There's no doubt about that because the reason is I had to put my truck in the shop to get some new tires and brakes. So now I will have my commute that's only like 15 minutes, but when you go back and forth 3 days, you get to listen to the whole thing. Point is, I'll listen to it. But you recently had Robbie Gordon on. What was your biggest surprise or aha moment in your talk with Robbie Gordon there? I don't want you to have to not bury the lead. What's the opposite? Like spoil anything? Yeah. But what's the what to you? In third person here now was like, holy crap.
That he said he almost ran the Indy 500 last year.
Wow.
He apparently was really close. And after the podcast was over, I had this confirmed to me by a couple other people that he was pretty close to returning to run the Indianapolis 500 for the first time in, I guess, what then would have been 14 years in 2018. I think the last start he made in it was 2004. He almost won that race in 1999. So that was a bit revelatory. But I also liked... I asked him if the ship had sailed on NASCAR, if that was still a possibility they might return, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I never say never." I think road courses, the Roval, and in classic like Robbie Gordon, like brash, kind of cocky fashion, he said, we went to if we go to a road course race right now, I'd still be at the top of the board. I'd still be one of the fastest guys.
Well, I believe it.
which I just love. What it's worth. Yeah, I would see no reason either. The guy just turned 50, but I wouldn't doubt him.
I'd love to see him raising hell in the Xfinity Series on the Roval.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to see him dumping everybody getting to the front in Cup because of when the race is. Because it's in the playoff. But
true. Playoff.
But I mean, and I'm open to suggestion on why that perspective sucks. But I mean, I love the episode. Robbie, he's True. There's a reason why he was good at everything that he wanted to be good at, because he's got that true grit.
I don't know if I've told the story on the podcast before, but I was in the Atlanta airport. Had to be 2 to 3 years ago now, maybe 2 years ago, and I was flying to who knows where, and I was having a drink at the bar beforehand, whichever bar I was at, whatever it was, and I think it was on Sunday because I had to be at the client site Monday morning or whatever, early. So I was like, I'm gonna just get there Sunday, wherever I'm going, probably New York or DC, one of them two, and I'm watching. So it's Sunday, so a NASCAR race is on. So I'm watching a NASCAR race and I'm reacting to it. And the guy next to me says, we start talking. He reacts a little bit, and I'm like, "Oh, you're you're a NASCAR fan, huh?" And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, I dabble, blah 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 blah." And we get to talking. He's Robbie Gordon's personal business partner. I got his card and everything, and after all this stuff, I never followed up, which I feel like a jackass because I need to pull that card back out and see who that was and all that. But it was very funny.
Yeah, I could use some help.
Well, he's like, Robbie Gordon. And I'm like, do I know Robbie Gordon? Go F yourself. And
everybody remembers Montreal.
Right. And he's like, yeah, me and him are, we run this series. And I'm like, oh my God. So we had
That's funny.
That broke the ice. It was really cool after that. So
that is cool. Hey, speaking to his following, I mean, I couldn't get over how much passionate feedback I got. I mean, I knew that he has this fervent fan base, but I'd sort of forgotten how truly loyal diehards they are. And I think it's partially because he has that brashness, that sort of rebellious, iconoclast, anti-establishment attitude that people love. I mean, the guy can absolutely drive. I mean, he's unbelievable generational talent, but I think it's also that attitude. And two things to share real quickly. One of the reasons we talked to him was he's running Dakar. He returned to the Dakar Rally. It started a couple of days ago. Daily weeknight daily updates on NBCSN. I think every night we have an update at 6:30 p.m. We have a half-hour show recapping what happened. And of course, this is day 2 of the Dakar Rally, and Robbie Gordon's already mad at organizers because they're restricting. He tried to come with this vehicle that he knew might be gaming the system a little bit. And he kind of talks about this in the podcast. He's like, I'm not sure if they're going to put new rules in or restrict my limits on speed. And of course they have. And naturally, day 2, the headlines are, Robbie Gordon, really angry with ASO officials, which again, I think is just the essence of Robbie Gordon. And then the other thing is, you guys mentioned Montreal. Robbie Gordon only has only has one Xfinity Series race win. He won the Xfinity Series race at Richmond in 2004 with his team, but he has 2 Xfinity win banners in his shop, still hanging in the shop. When I talked to him for the podcast last week, 2 weeks ago, and one of them is he's got a win banner in his shop hanging for Montreal, which I think, that's again essence of Robbie Gordon.
Very much the essence of Robbie Gordon. And so for the listeners who may not have an opportunity, we would certainly suggest that you all go listen to Nate's show with Robbie Gordon. But in case you don't, or you want to preface for what Nate's talking about with Robbie and his equipment is, they essentially built a 300 horsepower Polaris Razor to run this race, and it'll do about $110 on a flat, hard surface. And they're running this race in Peru, which I think there's a lot of sand. He talked about that, but I'll let y'all listen if you want to. If you don't, just imagine basically it's scale up a Polaris Razor to a full size road vehicle and put a actual real motor in it. And that's what he's racing.
Yeah, because the Peru course is 90% sand dunes, or so he thought that's what it would be. So he thought, if I build like what they call a UTV type car, but enter it in the overall, I'll have this unfair advantage that I'll be able to go faster than everybody else. And apparently it did work out that way, but much to Robbie's chagrin, they found a way to sort of restrict him. I guess they're holding him to 85 miles an hour or something, and he's going 20 miles an hour slower than cars that are bigger that aren't restricted or something. So, oh well.
The Robbie Gordon deal. Y'all be sure to listen to that. I will be starting tomorrow morning, Nate's podcast. Let's talk about the silly season a bit. Got a few things going on. Daniel Suarez is the big news to SHR. Nate, give us the download.
Yeah, I think we were all fully anticipating that this was going to happen. Everybody thought Stewart-Haas Racing was the natural landing spot, provided he can get sponsorship. And as we learned in the announcement Monday, he had that sponsorship. He brought some money from Eris, which had sponsored him with Joe Gibbs Racing in Cup and Xfinity for the past 3 years. So he was fortunate, and he was able to bring them along with him to Stewart-Haas Racing. And as you guys know, that's what is the key to anything these days with drivers getting rides. I mean, Daniel Suarez, certainly an accomplished driver, Xfinity Series champion, and showed last year he was close to winning in Cup, but still probably isn't going to get that Stewart-Haas ride unless he brings some money with him. And I talked to him on Monday. Dave Burns did an interview with him, and then I talked to him for a little bit. And it's interesting. Like, I think he certainly has something to prove. He's very candid in some regard, but he's careful about not going over the line and criticizing Gibbs. But I do think, he did say, like, he felt as if there were some people who had his back who ended up not having his back. And I think he did say he was kind of blindsided when Gibbs hired Martin Truex Jr. to take that number 19 ride that Daniel Suarez had driven the past 2 years, and kind of left him scrambling a little bit. And for a month, I don't think he knew what was going to happen, as he said he was kind of in this dark place. So I think it'd be really interesting to see like how he can do in 2019. I mean, certainly Eric Almirola showed last year that you can go from being a guy who is mid-pack or worse and get in one of those cars and win and make the playoffs. And Daniel Suarez is going from another powerhouse team where he didn't win, but again, he had his moments last year with JGR. Now he's stepping into a ride that made the playoffs last year, won a race, and who knows? I think certainly he's expecting some big things.
So I wonder what we've heard as fans is that JGR tends to sign contracts with sponsors as a company and not based on a driver.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, was there some special dispensation with this situation with Daniel Suarez because Joe Gibbs basically forced him out? And I don't know what his contract was, and I don't really care, to be honest. But they said they want Truex. Truex is going to bring Bass Pro with him because Bass Pro is going to follow Truex everywhere. Because why wouldn't
Truex just announced, they just announced a new sponsor for a full season sponsor, didn't they?
They announced Bass Pro, and then today they announced Auto Owners. Both
Auto Owners Insurance,
Truex.
yeah.
Both of them had sponsored Truex at Furniture Row.
Yeah, they were at Furniture Row.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that was
you're
was
right.
Interesting.
You're right that there was news. I think what I'm saying is, did Joe Gibbs do Daniel a solid by releasing Eris?
I know what you're asking, Sherwin. It's a good question. It's phrased well, and it is an interesting sidelight of this. I think the answer is Eris, I think, decided to go with Suarez after this sort of unfolded the way it did. And again, if you read what Suarez said to me and said to some other people on Monday, there was about a month there where he wasn't sure if Eris was going to go with him. I mean, he was hoping that they would, and there were some ties there with some people who have supported Daniel Suarez throughout his racing career from its origins in Mexico. There are some ties to Eris from the the billionaire Slim family that has been really supportive of Suarez's career. So you can kind of connect the dots there. But
Slim family in Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about one of the richest families in the world.
True.
Yeah. So, they had some connections to Eris, and I think they certainly have been big supporters of helping Daniel get established in NASCAR. But, yeah, it's a good question because, sometimes teams do get sponsors on their own, and they're not connected to drivers. And, they can pick and choose and elect to let a driver go. Sometimes the sponsor is attached to the driver. And in this case, I think it was a little bit murky for a period of time last year whether Eris would stay with Gibbs. And I think with Truex coming over, is the announcements that Rusty was talking about the last couple of days. Certainly, we see now that with auto owners and Bass Pro, I think they make up. I think the announced number of races was like 30 of the 36. I mean, they only got like a half dozen races left to fill on that car. So I think Truex came with enough sponsorship attached to him that I don't know if you could say Gibbs was necessarily like being, magnanimous by like letting Eris go and doing Suarez a favor because, hey, they did kind of unceremoniously kick him out of the ride, but I don't think they fought him. It doesn't seem like they fought to keep them either. And, it's also a good question of like, what transpires there as far as, generally drivers sign 3-year deals. And this is a case where Suarez got 2 seasons and, teams have performance clauses in their contracts with drivers where they can choose to let drivers go if they don't make the playoffs or they don't win or they don't meet certain incentives. So there were probably like a lot of other things at play there as well.
It's surprising. At the outset, where I'm probably beating an old drum here, but Suarez feels like he's on the upslope, and for them to let him go, it was just kind of like, well, that's kind of weird because this is the same team that produced Joey Logano, who just won the championship.
It feels like Toyota really stuck a strong hand in the pot.
Yeah. And so what I was going to say about Eris, we've talked about it here before, is there's somebody at Eris that really loves NASCAR. This is if Rusty or Sherwin were like senior executives or CEOs or something at that kind of company. You can't walk into Walmart and buy, I'd like one Eris, please. Like that's not a thing. This is a B2B company.
Yeah, it's a service contract.
Yeah, this is a B2B company.
Or a mechanical device.
Well, yeah. If you look if you unscrew your cable box and open it up and look inside somewhere is printed Eris. That's how non-consumer they are. So
I'll say this though, that I'm looking at my cable modem right now, which is a Motorola Eris surfboard cable modem. And I was aware when we bought that cable modem 3 years ago that it was Eris branded and a product. But you're right. Like Eris is more. They're definitely in NASCAR, from what I've heard, for more of the B2B and more of the hospitality and entertaining clients at track. And I think you're right. Obviously, they're getting something out of NASCAR, which is beneficial for them. Which is good for NASCAR. It's a story that needs to be told more often. But I would kind of be curious. I haven't talked to anybody at that company. I haven't really done any due diligence on how they do consumer wise. But I remember when they announced when Carl Edwards was in the Eris car in 2015, and they announced that sponsorship. They did make a little bit of a consumer play in terms of, hey, this is what we're about. Hey, we're like internet. Affiliated company, you can buy our products. So
I'm in, like, my work is in that space. I work in the cable TV and advertising and all that stuff. So for what it's worth, I do know people at Eris, as it turns out. And when they said Eris is sponsored, I went, really? Eris? Yeah. Same Eris? I called those guys. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't watch NASCAR. We just program stuff. So anyway, I thought it was funny. Sherwin.
Yeah. Well, so what I'm saying is I wonder if this was, obviously it's a relationship with Suarez and his family, but is it a future endeavor? Are they trying to be the ship that drives into the iceberg that is Wi-Fi at all racetracks and the ability to supply the infrastructure for that for NASCAR fans?
Man, I hope so, Sherwin. That's something that I've been beating the drum about that for the last year too. That's something that NASCAR and tracks really need to get to work on and need to work harder on. And when I had Steve Phelps, NASCAR president, on the podcast last year, that was something I probably should have hammered him more about. That is something that absolutely, I'll just say it. NASCAR tracks are behind on that front, and it needs to get fixed. So it would be great if there was more of a push because of that. If you had an internet affiliated sponsor like them in NASCAR, and that they could do more to help and increase the Wi-Fi connectivity for fans at racetracks, because that is something that it needs to happen. It definitely, they're a little bit behind on that, and they need to catch up.
Well, wouldn't it be? I mean, wouldn't it be better for Eris to have a relationship with the team? Obviously, to have their billboard running around the track every day, which we think is probably going to be, successful. Because we think Daniel Suarez is a good race car driver, and we know the number 41 race car team is a very good race car team. But at the same time, be partnered with NASCAR in trying to figure out how do we deliver Wi-Fi to the stands, to the campgrounds, to anybody that would actually tweet something positive that maybe goes to the racetrack and shuts down, puts it in airplane mode because they don't have a big data package. Otherwise, would we be tweeting very positive things about being at the racetrack?
I agree with you, man. Like, that's something that that really needs to be addressed. My friend who writes for the Associated Press in Philadelphia, Dan Gelston, had this great story last year in which he talked about like all these things racetracks were doing to try to draw younger fans and a younger audience, and one of them was like, I think it was Pocono or somebody like that was doing like these college themed days at the track a week, or maybe it was a Saturday of a race weekend. I think like they've done it at a few other tracks too, but he's from Philadelphia, works out of that bureau, so he focused on Pocono. And I think like they had like some sort of selfie contest or something like that involving social media. And Dan's kicker to the story was, hey, it would be great if they could post these to whatever social media they're using, but unfortunately the track isn't Wi-Fi enabled, which just kind of goes without saying. I mean, I feel like part of the reason things fell behind here was that NASCAR was maybe, and the tracks were maybe a victim of their own success a little bit here with Sprint, but previously Nextel, when they had that Nextel that then became Sprint title sponsorship. I still have Sprint service on my cell phone because if you wanted to have a really good cell phone connection at a racetrack from 2004 to 2014, 15, like you knew which cell phone
they had boosters.
Yeah. And so I think like that for so long things were good on that front that maybe some of the Wi-Fi issues or whatever got neglected a little bit, and that's why maybe things are a little bit behind. Because I'm not saying that like anybody's cell phone service is necessarily bad nowadays. I mean, my Sprint service is still fairly reliable. Probably not as reliable. It isn't as reliable at most places as it was when they were the title sponsor. But I think that might have changed the game a little bit too.
I think it depends on the track and who their affiliation partners are with. For the most part, when we go to Atlanta, it's not so bad. Even in Bristol, we went to Phoenix this past year for the first time.
I was about to bring this up.
It was absolutely garbage. My phone
wasn't
even functional.
Yeah. It's unfortunately. I mean, I remember. I can think back to a race weekend like 13 years ago, like the second year of the Nextel sponsorship, where if you didn't have a Nextel phone on property, I remember other PR people at other providers, and they couldn't get calls out or calls in. So yeah, I mean, that's an example of like where hopefully things are changing on that front.
I'm gonna do some segues here because we talked about B2B, and ISM is a B2B who's doing pretty good stuff in terms of because they do displays and stuff. And when
International Sports Management, is that what that acronym is?
ISM is ISM Connect, Integrated Screen Management.
Screen management.
Yeah. So when we went to Phoenix, and of course that's ISM Raceway now and all that. And I mean, they have the screens everywhere and all that stuff. The other one that I was going to bring up, and here's my segue, DC Solar. You can't just go, well, maybe you can.
Well,
Hold on. They have done a great job up until this segue right here of a thing that like, hey, look at us. You can't exactly go buy, maybe you can, as a consumer buy a DC Solar thing, but I'm not going to go look at DC Solar as a guy who lives right here in Atlanta and, you know, whatever on my day-to-day. But I feel like they've done, again, up until this segue, a great job of marketing themselves in the same way that ISM has done in terms of B2B, business-to-business sponsors. Now, that said, the segue, obviously at this point, which came out this past Friday, Ganassi pulling out of Xfinity because pretty much they can't get a sponsor because DC Solar is out as a sponsor because they kind of got raided by the FBI. But
well, and there's no time.
Yeah, and the big hurt here, the part that kills us the most, is Ross Chastain.
Yeah, watermelon boy,
who just got. I mean, we were talking 2 months ago and celebrating, throwing our hats in the air, and having a good old time and shooting off fireworks. That Ross Chastain gets to, have a full ride and for it to be like, the rug pulled out from under him. I mean, I don't know what's going through the dude's head, but I hope it's just like, easy come, easy go kind of stuff. But holy crap! Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's really terrible about it, is that he was such a feel-good story toward the end of 2018 and winning that race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and then having that lead to the storybook full-time
the Kevin Harvick
caliber
deal
ride at Chip Ganassi Racing, and having all that just get yanked away. It's not good. It's certainly, unfortunately, and I did a column about that toward the end of last year. I felt like that was a lot of the theme for NASCAR last year, is you would have these really good positive stories that invariably they'd be followed by something negative that would sort of like diminish, overshadow it.
So this is your fault.
That was the case here. Yeah, you can just blame me. No. I was just noticing the trend. It seemed like, unfortunately, hopefully in 2019 that's not a theme anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we feel like we're probably just a tiny bit closer to it doing this fan podcast thing we do, because I believe Ross Chastain, outside of Jeff Gluck and Bob Pockrass, is the person in racing that we actually met the most last year.
Dude, like I didn't want
I think
to
we met him. We went to 8 cup races. I think we met him 6 times.
I am more emotionally invested in Ross Chastain than any other driver at this point, and like I didn't want to bring it up on this podcast, but I'm like, I might sniffle a little bit, right? You know what I mean? Like this.
Yeah.
This.
Where'd you guys run into him? Just like in the grandstands, or
no? He's
hanging out.
He comes to the tweet ups, man.
He comes to every
He
tweet
is
up.
so awesome. And then we got a
yeah.
chance to go to a couple of those sign the hero card things.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we met him.
It got hilarious
5 times.
After number 4.
It was Talladega.
Yeah.
We had already, that was number 4.
Yeah, Talladega
because we'd already seen him at Atlanta and Bristol and
Phoenix.
And Phoenix.
Like we had gone all the way out there. He's like, "What are you doing?"
At podcasts, or not podcasts, but at Tweet Ups, and we rolled into the tent at Talladega for the Xfinity hero card signing session, and he looked up and he goes, "Oh, damn."
Yeah, he's
I had
like,
already
"Oh,
asked
crap."
him like 3 times to be on the podcast, which he still hasn't been on. And it's fine. He can come on whenever he wants.
It's fine. Here's the thing. He has said yes.
Every time.
He was a hard yes the first time. It's just, our people and his people and whatnot. I mean, we're the only people in our people, but,
I was going to say.
And he's the
I
only
didn't have
people.
to go through any people to get on this podcast.
Yeah, our people are having a hard time getting in touch with his people.
Right. I need to yell at our people. That's what it comes down to. Give them some grief. You know what? Let's do this. I'm looking at some different questions and whatnot. I'm trying to go through here. Let's see. You know what? Let's do this one. I really like this one, actually. Andrew Kantian, at KHANTZIAN. He says, in year number 4 of the charter system, we have 37 full-time entries, 36 charters. FRM has 4 after the lawsuit with BK Racing. The 97 and 72 cars plan to run full-time, and both need charters. Is the question after all this analysis, is the system working? And Sherwin, this is time for me to do a little bit, and Nate, it's time for me to do a little bit of
Introspection.
Or a little bit of like admitting a fault. This is what I'm doing. I'm admitting a fault. This whole charter thing came out, and I saw it, and I'm looking at all the stuff, and I'm like, I don't get it, and I don't really care to get it. Like I don't understand it, and I'm not going to seek out to try to understand this thing because I as a fan, I don't really care too much. So where I'm going with this is that I have no idea what all this means. And y'all, I mean, I'm following NASCAR. I kind of co-host a NASCAR podcast and stuff. I feel like I'm in the in. I know what's going on. I do not get the charter crap for nothing, Sherwin. So, Sherwin, what do you got?
So before we throw it to the Northwestern grad and let him actually tell us what really matters, I would say they went half-ass in with the charter because it's not a franchise, but it's like half-ass of a franchise.
Okay.
I think what needed to come with it is, this is what the value of it is like today on the trade value mark, like what a standard cup team per car value is.
Well, and we don't have that information.
And we have no idea what that is.
Yeah, we don't, and that's one of the big things. We don't know what it is.
And
maybe I do know a little bit more about charters than I'm giving out, but it
needed to become controlled, much like we saw Deloitte come in and audit books. I think they're headed in the right direction in that respect. We'll leave that alone for now until we get some results from that, if we get any at all, because NASCAR thinks every fan is stupid. But I think the problem with the charter is it was supposed to look like a franchise, but it doesn't actually look like a franchise. Like even the crappiest franchise in Major League Baseball, like the worst team out there, who is it? I don't know. The Marlins right now.
Whoa. Yeah.
It's still worth $680 million or whatever it is.
Jeez.
So it's close to $1 billion. We've seen charters get purchased along with junk trash.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I'll give you a charter, three baseball cards, and a stick of gum.
A stick of gum, a boring machine, a roller for sheet metal for $2.5 million. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like, this is supposed to be a company that makes like real, like serious money.
Yeah, yeah. Shed some light on us. Nate, what's the deal?
I guess what would be the question?
The question is
the charter system working for NASCAR?
Oh, I was going to say the question is, what the hell?
That's what. That's. I mean, I think Kansian's question is the charter system working the way the alliance hoped it would?
I think it's probably working for most of the people who are involved in it, because the people who have charters built the system. They built the system with NASCAR. So
you mean the top 20 that have a chance to make the playoffs, that are all $20 million teams?
I mean,
per car.
I mean, the charter negotiations happened with most of the team owners who have charters. So, I mean, do I think like they built a system that they were happy with? When they held those round-the-clock negotiating sessions right before the season started in 2016? Yes.
Absolutely.
Do I think it's resulted in a more predictable revenue stream for them that probably they're happier with than they were previously, and where they seemingly maybe got a little bit of a bigger slice of the pie than they had before? Yeah. I mean, they NASCAR and the teams came to an agreement because both sides were fairly happy with what they landed on. Now, everything that's transpired since then, for us, I think you're right, it has been problematic, because I think when you get into these Byzantine rules where you're leasing charters, you can lease a charter one season, but then you can't lease it again, or then you have to sell it, where it's dependent on the value of the charter is dependent on historical average finishing position over a 3-season period.
That's where I gave up, by the way. That's where I gave up.
Well, I think this is the problem. Like, and this is partially on us, but not entirely. like when the focus becomes on all that horse trading that goes on between teams on leasing charters and all that nonsense. That's something that NASCAR and the teams, they put too much of a spotlight on that. And part of that is they wanted to be transparent. I'll give them credit for that. They wanted to explain what the charter system is, although they don't tell us what the charters sell for. Or, when we ask them questions on the day the charters were announced, like, what are the values? They wouldn't give us straight answers on that. So amidst the transparency, there is still some nebulous sort of answers that never really got answered. But I do think it's another example of part of, if there are problems with consuming NASCAR coverage these days or trying to follow it, is it's too complicated. And this is an example of it's too complicated. And yes, the media is somewhat complicit in it because we, Bob Pockris, my colleague Dustin Long, go to those court hearings through the courthouse and figure out what BK Racing is doing and what's becoming of their charter, and will Front Row get it, and all those. I mean, those are news stories that we have to cover. I mean, those
Sure.
are, that's the laws of journalism sort of dictate, unwritten as they are, that we should go and cover those stories. For me, it's incumbent upon NASCAR and the teams to figure out a way to make the charter system maybe less of a focus for the race fan, because ultimately, yes, it might impact you in terms of like how your team does on the track, based on what their business model revenue stream is and what kind of charter they have. But the focus should be on the track. The focus should be on the teams and the drivers. And, I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle in some ways in regards to that, but I always wish that there was more focus, that more of the storylines are revolving around what's happening on the track than off the track.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly on all of the objective things that you just said. I don't want to put the real genie back in the bottle because nobody would if they've ever watched that show. But as we
That's
move
a good point.
on,
I hadn't thought of the genie with the J.
I don't know why we wouldn't want to know what the value of a charter is, and why would one company's charter have more value than others if it's only a starting spot. You can always perform better than everybody. So why is one charter worth more than another charter?
Yeah. So with Andrew Cancion's question, is the system working? I don't know. I guess it's so much of an enigma.
I can tell you this. Let me throw out one more thing. This year, you're going to see a real interesting focus. I've already heard chatter in the offseason about it. And you have a team that is getting the Furniture Racing charter, which, you asked, like, what are the values? I mean, the values are based on performance.
3-year averages.
The 3-year average. So look at Furniture Row Racing's 3-year average, 16, 17,
that
18.
Team is going to get $8.5 million next year.
I don't know what the numbers are. I mean, obviously they're 7 figures. I don't know what the money guarantees are, but it's significant, and that might be the most valuable charter in the series. I mean, that charter might be worth more than any team that team's going to be racing against this year, in terms of just the sheer performance value. And yet that team is not going to be, top caliber, and that is going to create, I think, some interesting discussions and maybe some rumblings. Something just to keep an eye on as 2019 gets underway.
No, that's 100%. And I'm sorry I kept interrupting you because I was excited. It's an average of 3-year performance, which means why wouldn't, if that's really the case, if the charters are based on an average of 3-year performance with the TV money and whatever the sponsorship money that NASCAR contributes to teams based on their finish position, why wouldn't they just disclose that? Because wouldn't that make it easier for everybody to understand how this process works? Why hide it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, again, like I talked about transparency, one of the first things that happened after the charter system came into effect was they got rid of purse distributions. For the longest time, for the first, what would it have been?
For 25 years.
49 to 2015, you knew what everybody made earnings-wise.
Yes.
And then as soon as the charter system hit,
and you knew why.
they got rid of that. because of the system. I will just add, though, like, I mean, the 3-year performance isn't the only criteria. I mean, there's a couple of other criteria that factor into, you know, what teams get paid and what charters are worth. So I don't want to make it seem like it's that simple, but that's part of it.
Well, it seems like that is the lion's share of what the bell curve is.
Well, and Sherwin, again, as a fan, I've tuned out the last, like, 4 minutes of this podcast. I'm just, like, fumbling around with some plastic here.
I
and
watched
stuff.
you.
Like,
it was fun.
It's like, oh, we're talking about charters.
Like, I don't care.
How can the casual fan give a?
Why don't we just sell franchises?
How
sell
often have I said
4-car franchises?
How often have I said the S word on this podcast, and I almost just did?
How often have you said shit?
I was like, how? Why should I give a shit about charters as I'm sitting here playing with this podcast?
It's like, only the second podcast you've ever done that.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad. You know,
I had to encourage you a
little bit, maybe a little bit. Yeah, it's.
I don't think our downloads are related to us having the PG narrative anymore.
Right. We're not gonna go forward on that. That's a rhetorical question. Point is, let's move on. Actually, let's
move to something wildly different if you got it. I don't know if you do or not.
Something wildly different. Let's do it. Let's close out with this one. The Chili Bowl. Nate, have you been following along with the Chili Bowl? It really feels like it's gaining some traction from NASCAR fans. Of course, we got Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, Casey Kane.
Casey's racing.
Oh my goodness! As Casey Kane fans, we're gonna have to be like
Legacy Carson Elledge. Carson
Elledge.
Yeah.
So we've got some names in there, and it feels like there's this is getting more and more traction. We don't know if it's the fact that we're paying attention to more racing in general, and so the crowd that pays attention to the Chili Bowl has entered our spectrum, or that our spectrum has grown to people, or the people in our spectrum have grown to like Chili Bowl.
Yeah.
So
have we broadened our Venn diagram of racing influence to more series?
Yeah. No, that's a good chicken and egg type question. You know, I think we're all more cognizant of it because of a few factors. One, I think certainly Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell have done a ton to raise that profile, not just because of the way they talk about how much they love dirt and the way they race dirt all the time. I mean, they were both just over in freaking
Auckland, New Zealand,
spending most of Christmas break racing on dirt.
So was
and now
Ms.
they're coming back here and they're going to run Chili Bowl next week. It's not just that they spread the gospel; it's that they're so damn good at it, and they're so much fun to watch. I mean, I didn't grow up a race fan, but I've learned to appreciate dirt racing. I love watching the camping, well, not the Camping World anymore, Gander Mountain Truck Series.
There you go. Look at you getting it started.
My man.
I don't know if
Gander
I said that
Mountain
right or not. I love watching that race at Eldora Speedway, and I hope that Eldora gets to host some other NASCAR series because I think dirt can be a lot of fun. I'm not saying do it all the time, but it is fun to watch. And I think in part it's because of guys like Kyle Larson and guys like, Christopher Bell, 2-time defending winner of Chili Bowl. I mean, they're phenoms. I mean, they're so good at it. And they when you watch them, you sort of understand like what the allure and what the appeal is. So all that. And also I think, I'll be jealous because I won't be going next week. And maybe much like Rolex 24, I finally get to tick that off my bucket list this year. Maybe Chili Bowl, someday I'll get to tick that off. But I'll be jealous of Jeff Gluck because I believe he's going for the second straight year.
Yes,
that is correct.
Being there, that did a lot. I mean, give Gluck some credit. I mean, having him there and other named journalists like himself, that helps.
That's a very good point, especially in the in the parlance of the times.
In the parlance of our time.
Yeah. The changing face of media and of the sport and all that. Having somebody like Gluck at something like that is absolutely something that's going to draw some attention. from the Twittersphere. Is that a word?
Twittersphere? Twitterverse. Twitterverse.
Twitterverse.
That's the word I've been using.
I'm making up words.
I'm going to text Gluck and tell him to get me somebody good to bring on the show.
Tell him, hey, how's it going from Russ? I was going to say something disparaging, but I figured I'd be respectful. Anyway, let's do a quick new follower shout-out. We've got Cody Howell at COTIHOWELL, music reporter out of Nashville, with the old blue check mark.
Yeah, I can only assume this has come from our relationship with Sydney Lett, who provides our intro and outro music.
Oh, good point.
Wonderful
outro music. I need to go
lady.
ahead and pull that up, make sure that's ready to go.
And very fun song. It's called We Are NASCAR.
Yeah.
A lot of guests like Nate don't actually get to hear it.
Yeah, unless
because of the way we have our our stuff set up. So.
And Candace Fairley at Maria FAIR, NASCAR and country music fan from Mississippi. So thank you, Candace, for giving us the old follow. With that, let's Nate, why don't we have you close us out? Tell the folks where they can find you, what you're up to, what's coming up next, and what's going on.
Sure. So at Nate Ryan is the Twitter account, NBCsports.com/NASCAR, NBCsports.com/Motors, the first for NASCAR coverage, the latter for all your other motorsports coverage, which, as we mentioned, NBC Sports Group doing a lot more of this year. And the NASCAR NBC podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and where you can download podcasts. Probably no new episode this week, but I definitely will have one next week, possibly two, and definitely will have one going in the Rolex 24. A couple that I think people are really going to like relating to the 2001 Rolex 24 when Dale Earnhardt and Dale Earnhardt Jr. both ran in a Corvette there. Some good podcasts coming up talking about that I think people will enjoy. So some good stuff to come before the NASCAR season gets cranked next month.
I get goosebumps every time, Sherwin, when we sit here and talk with our guests, and we've been having fun, and we're breaking ankles. It's breaking balls.
Breaking balls.
Yeah. We're just having fun with our guests. And at the end, we say, tell the folks where you can find it. Well, go to NBC.com. And you're like, oh, crap. This guy's important.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
It's such a cool part of why this community is so awesome.
Yes.
And why we say that over and over and over again, and we will keep saying it, that this community,
best sport
in NASCAR, they're so giving of their time. I don't even know how to say it. I'm tripping over my words.
Well, Sherwin, so don't say it. Let's do this. Let's close this thing out and give him some time back because he's been with us for so long. Nate Ryan, we appreciate you so much. Here's the deal, y'all. You know where to find us, PTMpodcast.com, at PTM Podcast. As always, we'll catch you next week. Of course, we'll figure something out. We're going to have some fun.
You know who's on next week?
Who's on next week?
Mr. Trevor Rizzo, teenage late model racer.
Oh, that's going to be so much fun. Y'all know where to find me, Tailgate Mayor, Rusty Wallace, at Tailgate Mayor on the Twitter.
And you can find me at Pregame Engineer Andrew Sherwin, and also on Instagram at Andrew L. Sherwin.
All right, and we'll talk to y'all next week. It's going to be a blast. Peace out, y'all.
Woo!
Thank you, Sydney! What's up, Nate?
Yo.
Nate, we are still live on the YouTube. We have concluded the
the
audio
podcast portion.
Yep. And in 3, 2, 1, 0, I am done editing.
All right.
Boom, boom, boom.
I like that approach.
Yeah. I chopped off the end.
Hey, we only got 2 cuss words in there that time, right?
Well, you egged me on. And
I baited you into saying shit.
Yeah.
I mean, Nate, by now, third time in, you know what we're doing. But we are super excited about this upcoming season, of course. But we didn't even, test your waters on what the package is. So just
I know. I know
you
you want to get into like horsepower and stuff like that.
Yeah,
sorry,
you need to thank us for that.
Nah, I tend to be so long-winded. I probably shorted you guys a little bit on the
No.
so.
Like in the off season, there's no reason to give it hell.
Plenty
of
time to talking about that. I from talking to people in the industry, I really don't think it was a good question you guys had about how will it affect those engine builders. But from talking to people just this past weekend, actually at Daytona, talking to some NASCAR people, I don't think anybody knows what the impact's going to be till Atlanta, till that second race of the year, which I'm sure you guys will be there. That's when the cards are really going to get laid on the table, and we'll see where people are.
Yeah. Are you going to be in Atlanta?
I hope to. I don't know about the whole race weekend, but I was just talking to Dustin Long about that today. I think for race day, it's a short drive. I'll probably go for race day no matter what, just because I think you sort of have to be if you can get there. It's going to be. It's obviously Vegas will be more of a predictor because that's more of a mile and a half versus
it's
Atlanta's pavement,
smoother surface. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. It's more accurate barometer than
it's lower banking too.
Yeah, but Atlanta's still going to tell you a lot. I think from talking to people, talking to other the NBC analysts who are way smarter than I am have told me the same, that that's going to be a lot of anticipation.
Oh, Atlanta
and Daytona is going to be really interesting too, because Daytona is essentially the last race under last year's rules. So you look at
it'll be technically the only restrictor plate race we have in 2019.
That's a very that's profound.
And look at how good Stuart Haas was at Talladega. Look at how good the Fords were in general.
Ford.
If I was going to pick a winner for Daytona, it would almost have to be a Ford. And as I sit here right now, I feel like the Fords. I say Daytona is different from Talladega, but it seems like Fords will have a pretty big edge, I would think, going into Speed Weeks.
You think in motor, but the problem is, like, as much as they're excited, and I've listened to a couple other podcasts about how they're excited about the body, like, oh, we did all our wind tunnel work. This is going to be good. Chevy had a damn 45-minute TV program about how they did all their work on the Camaro, and that didn't turn out for shit.
No, that didn't turn out the way they anticipated, certainly. Yeah.
Let's do this. We're going to close down the YouTube, and thank you, everybody, for listening in live. We got a lot of great feedback about the episode. Folks enjoying what they're hearing. Thank you for being on. We'll talk to y'all next week, of course. Peace out.
Whew.